Marcus Wellington stepped out of his black luxury car and looked up at the huge cruise ship in front of him. The Royal Splendor was the biggest and most expensive cruise ship in the Mediterranean Sea. Only very rich people could afford to travel on it. Marcus smiled as he watched the workers carry his many expensive bags onto the ship. He loved showing everyone how much money he had. Marcus was 48 years old and owned a big technology company. He had made millions of dollars by creating apps for phones. He always wore the most expensive clothes and watches. His wife Sarah was 20 years younger than him and looked like a model. She had long blonde hair and always wore designer dresses. Their two children, Emma, who was 16, and Jake, who was 14, walked behind their parents looking bored. "Look at this ship," Marcus said loudly so other passengers could hear him. "I paid $50,000 for our suite. Most people will never see this much luxury in their whole lives." He wanted everyone around him to know he was very rich and important. Sarah rolled her eyes but said nothing. She was used to her husband's need to show off. Emma and Jake looked embarrassed. They had heard their father brag about money many times before. Other passengers nearby turned to look at Marcus. Some seemed impressed, but others looked annoyed by his loud voice and bragging. As they walked up the ramp to board the ship, Marcus continued talking. "I bought the most expensive suite on the whole ship. It has a private balcony, a hot tub, and even a butler. The champagne in our room costs more than most people make in a month." He laughed loudly at his own words. The ship was amazing inside. There were crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling, marble floors, and gold decorations everywhere. Rich passengers walked around in expensive clothes, drinking champagne and talking quietly. But Marcus's loud voice could be heard above everyone else's conversations. A crew member in a white uniform greeted them. "Welcome aboard the Royal Splendor, Mr. Wellington. My name is Carlos, and I will be your personal butler during your stay. Your suite is ready and waiting for you." "Good," Marcus said. "I hope everything is perfect. I paid a lot of money for this trip." He handed Carlos a small tip, much smaller than what other rich passengers usually gave. Carlos smiled politely, but Marcus did not notice the disappointed look in his eyes. Their suite was on the top deck of the ship. It was huge, with a king-size bed, a living room with leather furniture, and floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out at the blue ocean. The balcony had comfortable chairs and a table for eating meals outside. There was also a small hot tub where they could relax while watching the sunset. "This is more like it," Marcus said as he walked around the room. "This is how rich people should travel." Sarah sat down on the bed and looked tired. The children went to their connecting rooms without saying much. After they unpacked their clothes, Marcus decided to explore the ship. He wanted to see what other passengers were on board, and maybe find some people to impress with his wealth. The ship had many restaurants, bars, shops, and entertainment areas. There was even a casino where people could gamble and a spa where they could get massages. Marcus walked into the main bar area where many passengers were having drinks before dinner. The bartender was making colorful cocktails while people talked and laughed. Marcus ordered the most expensive whiskey on the menu and made sure to tell everyone around him how much it cost. "This whiskey is $300 a bottle," he announced to no one in particular. Most people have never even heard of it. Some passengers nearby nodded politely, but others moved away from him. As Marcus looked around the bar, he noticed a man sitting alone in a corner booth. The man had long dark hair and was wearing sunglasses even though they were inside. He had on a worn leather jacket and old jeans. He was quietly reading a book and sipping what looked like a simple beer, not an expensive cocktail like everyone else. Marcus stared at the man and started to form an opinion about him. The man's clothes were not expensive like everyone else's on the ship. His hair was messy and he looked like he had not shaved in a few days. Marcus thought the man looked like he was trying too hard to be cool and interesting. "Look at that guy over there," Marcus said to a couple standing near him. "He looks like he's pretending to be some kind of rock star or movie actor. Probably can't even afford to be on this ship." Marcus laughed and took another sip of his expensive whiskey. The couple looked uncomfortable and moved away without answering, but Marcus did not notice. He was too busy staring at the quiet man in the corner. Something about the man annoyed Marcus. Maybe it was because the man seemed so calm and peaceful while Marcus always felt like he had to prove himself to everyone. Marcus decided that this man would be perfect entertainment for his cruise. He loved making fun of people who he thought were beneath him. It made him feel more important and powerful. He had done it many times before at business meetings and social events. He would find ways to embarrass people and make them look foolish in front of others. The quiet man continued reading his book, completely unaware that Marcus was watching him and planning to make him the target of jokes and cruel comments. He occasionally looked up to watch the ocean through the big windows, but mostly he seemed content to read quietly and enjoy his simple beer. Marcus finished his drink and decided to go back to his suite to get ready for dinner. But he kept thinking about the strange man in the corner. He was already planning what he would say to make fun of him. Marcus loved being the center of attention, and he thought making jokes about the weird passenger would be a great way to entertain other people during dinner. As he walked back to his room, Marcus felt excited about the cruise. He had found someone to pick on, and he was sure it would make him very popular with the other passengers. He had no idea that his decision to target this quiet, peaceful man would soon become the biggest mistake of his life. Sarah was getting dressed for dinner when Marcus returned to their suite. "How was your exploration of the ship?" she asked without much interest. "Great," Marcus replied with a big smile. "I found some very interesting entertainment for tonight." The main dining room of the Royal Splendor was like a palace. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling and cast beautiful light on the white tablecloths and gold chairs. Rich passengers sat at round tables eating expensive food and drinking fine wine. Everyone was dressed in their best clothes for the welcome dinner. Marcus wore his most expensive black suit with a gold watch that cost more than a new car. Sarah looked beautiful in a red dress that showed off her jewelry. Emma wore a simple blue dress and Jake had on a navy suit that he clearly did not want to wear. The family was seated at a table near the center of the dining room where everyone could see them. "This is perfect," Marcus said as he looked around the room. "Everyone can see us from here." He wanted to make sure all the other passengers noticed how important and wealthy his family was. The waiter brought them menus with food that cost hundreds of dollars per dish. Marcus ordered the most expensive items and made sure to tell everyone at nearby tables how much everything cost. "The lobster here is flown in fresh from Maine every day," he announced loudly. "It costs $200 per plate, but when you have money like I do, price doesn't matter." Other passengers turned to look at him. Some seemed impressed, but others looked annoyed by his constant bragging. Emma stared down at her plate, embarrassed by her father's behavior. Jake played with his phone and tried to ignore what was happening. As Marcus was talking about his expensive wine choice, he spotted the quiet man from the bar. The stranger was sitting alone at a small table near the window. He was still wearing his leather jacket and sunglasses even in the fancy dining room. He was quietly eating soup and reading the same book from earlier. "Well, well," Marcus said with a big grin. "Look who decided to join us normal people for dinner." He pointed toward the quiet man so everyone at his table could see who he was talking about. Marcus stood up from his chair and raised his voice so more people could hear him. "Ladies and gentlemen, it looks like we have a very special guest with us tonight. I believe we're dining with a famous movie star." He said the words in a sarcastic way that made it clear he was making fun of the man. Several passengers turned to look at the quiet stranger, who continued eating his soup without looking up. Marcus walked closer to the man's table, followed by the stares of curious passengers. "Excuse me, sir," Marcus said in a fake polite voice. "Are you someone famous? You certainly dress like you think you are. That leather jacket and those sunglasses inside make you look very interesting." Some passengers nearby started to smile, thinking Marcus was being funny. The quiet man looked up slowly and gave Marcus a gentle smile. "I'm just trying to enjoy my dinner," he said in a calm, quiet voice. "Thank you for asking." Then he went back to reading his book and eating his soup. Marcus was not satisfied with this response. He wanted to get a bigger reaction from the man and from the other passengers who were now watching the interaction. "Oh, come on," Marcus said louder. "Don't be shy. I bet you're trying to be mysterious and cool. Let me guess. You're probably a struggling actor who thinks if you dress weird enough, someone might notice you and give you a job." A few passengers laughed nervously. They were not sure if this was funny or if Marcus was being too mean. The quiet man continued to ignore him, which only made Marcus more determined to get attention. Marcus started walking around the man's table like he was performing on a stage. "Look at this outfit, everyone. The messy hair, the old leather jacket, the sunglasses at night. I think we're looking at someone who watched too many pirate movies." He pretended to draw a sword and made exaggerated pirate gestures. "Ahoy, matey. Where's your ship?" More passengers were now watching the scene. Some laughed because they thought Marcus was entertaining, but others looked uncomfortable. The quiet man remained calm and continued eating, occasionally glancing up at Marcus with what seemed like pity rather than anger. "I bet this guy practices his mysterious look in the mirror every morning," Marcus continued. "Probably tells people at coffee shops that he's between projects or waiting for the right role." He made air quotes with his fingers as he spoke. Emma watched from their table and felt sick to her stomach. She had never been so embarrassed by her father's behavior. "Dad, please stop," she whispered. But Marcus was too caught up in his performance to hear her. Marcus then started doing impressions of what he thought the man might be like. He slouched his shoulders, messed up his hair, and pretended to read a book in an overly dramatic way. "I'm so deep and artistic," he said in a fake voice. "I wear sunglasses inside because my soul is too dark for normal light." The dining room was now watching the show that Marcus was putting on. Some passengers laughed and clapped, encouraging him to continue. Others looked worried and whispered to each other about whether someone should stop him. The quiet man finished his soup and asked the waiter for his check. He seemed completely unbothered by Marcus's performance, which frustrated Marcus even more. Marcus was used to getting strong reactions from people when he made fun of them. This man's calm response was not what he expected. "Oh, leaving so soon?" Marcus called out as the man prepared to leave. "Don't go yet. I was just getting started with my impression of you." He continued his exaggerated acting, pretending to be a sad, failed actor. The man stood up slowly and put some money on the table to pay for his meal. He looked directly at Marcus for the first time and spoke in a calm, kind voice. "I hope you enjoy the rest of your dinner," he said. Then he walked quietly out of the dining room, still carrying his book. Marcus watched him leave and then turned back to his audience with a big smile. "Well, that was interesting," he announced. "I guess some people can't handle a little friendly conversation." He laughed and returned to his table, feeling very pleased with himself. The other passengers slowly went back to their own conversations, but many kept glancing toward the door where the quiet man had left. Marcus sat down at his table and continued eating his expensive dinner, already planning more ways to entertain everyone by making fun of the mysterious stranger. "That was amazing," said a man from a nearby table. "You really showed that weird guy who's boss." Marcus smiled proudly and raised his wine glass in celebration, but Emma refused to look at her father. She felt ashamed and angry about what she had just witnessed. Sarah sighed and continued eating without saying anything. Jake kept playing with his phone, pretending nothing had happened. Marcus had no idea that his cruel entertainment had just begun what would become the most humiliating experience of his entire life. The next morning, Marcus woke up feeling very proud of himself. He had gotten lots of attention at dinner the night before, and several passengers had told him how funny his performance was. He decided that making fun of the quiet stranger would be his main entertainment for the entire cruise. After eating an expensive breakfast in the ship's fancy restaurant, Marcus went looking for his target. He found the man sitting on the deck reading his book and enjoying the morning sun. The stranger had chosen a quiet corner where he could watch the ocean and read in peace. Marcus immediately took out his phone and started taking pictures of the man without asking permission. "Look, everyone," he called out to other passengers who were walking by. "Our mysterious celebrity is having his morning photo shoot." He laughed loudly and took more pictures. The quiet man looked up from his book and saw Marcus pointing the phone at him. Instead of getting angry, he simply moved to a different chair that was further away. This calm response made Marcus even more determined to get a reaction. "Don't be shy," Marcus shouted across the deck. "I'm sure you're used to cameras. All famous people love attention, right?" He followed the man to his new seat and continued taking pictures. Several passengers stopped to watch what was happening. Marcus loved having an audience and decided to put on another show. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced like a tour guide, "here we see the rare wannabe celebrity in his natural habitat. Notice how he tries to look mysterious by wearing sunglasses and reading books that probably don't have any pictures." Some passengers laughed, but others looked uncomfortable. An elderly woman named Mrs. Chen whispered to her husband, "That young man is being very rude. Someone should tell him to stop." But her husband just shrugged and said, "It's not our business." Marcus was enjoying himself too much to notice that not everyone thought he was funny. He sat down at a table near the quiet man and started talking loudly on his phone. "Yeah, I'm on this amazing cruise," he said, making sure his voice carried across the deck. "There's this weird guy here who thinks he's some kind of movie star. He dresses like a pirate and sits around reading all day. It's hilarious." The quiet stranger continued reading his book, occasionally looking up to watch the seagulls flying over the ship. His peaceful reaction frustrated Marcus, who was used to people getting upset when he made fun of them. After lunch, Marcus decided to take his game to the next level. He gathered a group of passengers around the pool area and started telling them stories about the strange man he had discovered. "I think he might be practicing for a pirate movie," Marcus said with a big grin. "He probably goes to his room at night and practices saying 'Ahoy, matey' in the mirror." The group laughed and Marcus felt encouraged to continue. "Who wants to help me put on a little show?" he asked. "We could do some pirate impressions and see if our mysterious friend wants to join in." A few passengers agreed to participate, thinking it would be harmless fun. Marcus organized them into a small group and they started acting out pirate scenes right there by the pool. They waved imaginary swords, talked like pirates, and made loud R sounds. The quiet man was sitting nearby reading his book and drinking iced tea. When he heard the commotion, he looked up and saw what was happening. Instead of looking angry or embarrassed, he seemed sad. But he just went back to reading and tried to ignore the group. Marcus noticed the man's reaction and felt like he was winning some kind of game. "Look, everyone," he called out. "Our celebrity friend is pretending not to watch us. He's probably jealous that we're better actors than he is." The group laughed and continued their pirate performance. Other passengers gathered around to watch, and soon there was a small crowd. Marcus felt like the star of his own show, and he loved every minute of it. Later that afternoon, Marcus had an idea that he thought was very clever. He went to the ship's entertainment office and talked to Maria, the cruise director. "I have a great idea for tonight's show," he told her. "Why don't we have a pirate theme night? Everyone could dress up like pirates and we could have contests." Maria thought it sounded like fun and agreed to organize it. She made announcements over the ship's speaker system throughout the day. "Tonight we're having a special pirate theme party." Her voice echoed through the hallways. "Come dressed as your favorite pirate and join us for games and prizes." Marcus was very pleased with himself. He thought this would be the perfect way to embarrass the quiet stranger even more. He spent the rest of the day telling passengers about his idea and encouraging them to participate. Meanwhile, the quiet man continued to go about his day peacefully. He ate his meals alone, read his book on deck, and took walks around the ship. He seemed completely unaware that Marcus was planning an entire evening designed to make fun of him. That evening, many passengers showed up to the pirate party wearing costumes. There were plastic swords, eye patches, pirate hats, and fake beards everywhere. Marcus had rented the most elaborate pirate costume from the ship's costume shop. He looked like a cartoon pirate with a big feathered hat and a long red coat. "This is going to be perfect," Marcus told his wife as he adjusted his fake beard. "When our mysterious friend sees this party, he'll either have to join in or look like a fool for not participating." Sarah looked at her husband with disappointment. "Don't you think you're taking this too far?" she asked. "The man hasn't done anything to you. Why are you so obsessed with bothering him?" Marcus waved off her concern. "It's just harmless fun," he said. "Besides, if he really is some kind of actor, he should be able to handle a little attention." The pirate party was held in the ship's main entertainment lounge. There were decorations everywhere, and the staff had set up games like Walk the Plank and Find the Treasure. Marcus made sure he was the center of attention, leading pirate chants and organizing group activities. About an hour into the party, the quiet stranger walked through the lounge on his way to somewhere else. He was still wearing his regular clothes, the leather jacket and jeans, and carrying his book. When the crowd saw him, Marcus immediately pointed him out. "Look, everyone," Marcus shouted over the music. "Here's our real pirate. He doesn't need a costume because he dresses like this every day." The crowd turned to look at the man, and Marcus started leading them in a chant. "Pirate! Pirate! Pirate!" The quiet man stopped walking and looked around at all the people staring at him. For the first time since Marcus had started bothering him, he looked genuinely uncomfortable. But instead of getting angry or fighting back, he simply smiled politely and continued walking through the room. This reaction frustrated Marcus more than ever. He had been trying for 2 whole days to get this man to respond to his jokes and teasing, but nothing seemed to work. The stranger's calm, peaceful attitude made Marcus feel like he was losing some kind of contest. As the party continued, Marcus became more and more determined to get a reaction. He made louder jokes, organized bigger group activities, and even convinced the ship's photographer to take pictures of him with the real pirate, meaning the quiet stranger. But no matter what Marcus did, the mysterious man remained calm and dignified. He continued reading his book, eating his meals quietly and walking peacefully around the ship. His refusal to fight back or get upset only made Marcus try harder to embarrass him. By the end of the second day, Marcus had involved dozens of passengers in his cruel game. He had no idea that his behavior was about to lead to consequences he could never have imagined. Emma Wellington had not been able to sleep well for 2 nights. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her father making fun of the quiet stranger. She felt sick to her stomach thinking about how cruel and embarrassing his behavior had been. At 16 years old, Emma was smart enough to know that what her father was doing was wrong. On the 3rd morning of the cruise, Emma decided she could not watch her father's bullying anymore. She had to do something to make up for his terrible behavior. While her parents were still sleeping in their suite, she got dressed and went looking for the quiet man. She found him in the ship's library, a peaceful room filled with books and comfortable reading chairs. Very few passengers visited the library, so it was usually quiet. The man was sitting by a large window that looked out at the ocean, reading the same book he had been carrying for days. Emma stood in the doorway for several minutes, trying to get enough courage to approach him. She had never spoken to a stranger without her parents before, and she was nervous. But she knew she had to apologize for her father's behavior. Finally, she walked slowly toward his table. "Excuse me, sir," she said in a quiet voice. The man looked up from his book and smiled kindly at her. "I'm Emma Wellington. I think you might have seen my father around the ship." The man's smile became a little sad, but he nodded. "Yes, I believe I have met your father," he said gently. His voice was warm and friendly, not angry like Emma had expected. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," Emma said quickly before she lost her courage. "My father has been very rude to you, and it's not right. I'm embarrassed by his behavior, and I wanted you to know that not everyone in my family thinks what he's doing is okay." The man closed his book and gave Emma his full attention. "That's very kind of you to say," he replied. "What's your name again?" "Emma," she said, sitting down in the chair across from him. "And I really am sorry. I don't know why my father is acting this way. He's usually not this mean to people." The man smiled again. "Please don't worry about it, Emma. Your father hasn't hurt me. I've dealt with much worse things in my life than someone making pirate jokes." He laughed softly, and Emma could tell he was genuinely not angry. "But it's still wrong," Emma insisted. "You're just trying to read your book and enjoy your vacation, and he's making it into some kind of show for everyone to watch. It's not fair." "You seem like a very thoughtful young woman," the man said. "What are you reading on this trip?" He had noticed that Emma was carrying a book of her own. Emma held up her copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, which they were studying in her English class at school. "I have to read this for school, but I actually really like it. It's about standing up for what's right even when other people think you're wrong." The man's eyes lit up with interest. "That's one of my favorite books," he said. "Harper Lee wrote about very important things. What do you think of Atticus Finch?" Emma was surprised that this man wanted to talk about literature with her. Most adults didn't care about her opinions on books. "I think he's brave," she said. "He knows that defending Tom Robinson will make people angry with him, but he does it anyway because it's the right thing to do." "Exactly," the man said with enthusiasm. "Sometimes doing the right thing is difficult, especially when everyone around you is doing the wrong thing. But that's what makes it so important." They talked about the book for almost an hour. The man asked Emma thoughtful questions about the characters and themes, and he listened carefully to her answers. Emma had never had such an intelligent conversation with an adult who treated her like her opinions mattered. "You know," the man said eventually, "you remind me a lot of Scout Finch. She's young, but she has a strong sense of right and wrong. She sees things that adults miss sometimes." Emma felt proud of the comparison. "My father thinks I'm just a kid who doesn't understand the world yet," she said. "But I can see when someone is being hurt even if they don't fight back." "That's a very mature way to look at things," the man replied. "And the fact that you came here to apologize shows a lot of courage. Not many people your age would do that." As they continued talking, Emma began to notice things about the quiet stranger that her father had completely missed. He was incredibly intelligent and well-read. He spoke several languages, as she discovered when he helped translate some French phrases in her book. He was also very kind and patient, never making her feel stupid for not understanding something. "Can I ask you something?" Emma said. "Are you really just a regular person, or are you someone famous? My father keeps saying you're a wannabe actor, but you seem like..." "More than that," the man smiled mysteriously. "I'm just someone who enjoys reading and learning new things," he said. "Just like you. Fame isn't really important. What matters is how you treat other people and whether you stand up for what you believe in." Emma felt like he was avoiding her question, but she didn't want to push. She was enjoying their conversation too much to risk making him uncomfortable. "I should probably go back to my family," Emma said eventually. "But I wanted to thank you for talking with me. Most adults don't take teenagers seriously." "It was my pleasure, Emma," the man said. "You're clearly a very smart and caring person. Don't let anyone tell you that your age makes your opinions less important." As Emma got up to leave, she turned back to him. "I'm going to try to get my father to stop bothering you," she said. "I don't know if it will work, but I have to try." The man looked touched by her offer. "That's very kind, but don't worry about me. I can handle your father's jokes. I'm more concerned about how his behavior is affecting you and your family." Emma nodded and walked toward the library door. As she was leaving, she heard the man call out softly, "Emma." She turned around. "Keep reading," he said with a warm smile. "Books will teach you things about life that no school ever could." That afternoon, Emma tried to talk to her father about his behavior. She found him by the pool planning another round of jokes about the pirate wannabe. "Dad," she said, sitting down next to him, "I think you should stop making fun of that man. It's not funny anymore." Marcus barely looked at her. "Don't worry about it, honey," he said dismissively. "It's just harmless fun. The guy probably loves the attention. But Dad, I talked to him this morning, and he's actually really nice and smart. He's not what you think he is." Marcus finally looked at his daughter with surprise. "You talked to him?" "Emma, I don't want you talking to strange men on this ship. We don't know anything about him." "That's exactly my point," Emma said. "You don't know anything about him, but you're making fun of him anyway. What if he's not what you think? What if he's actually someone important?" Marcus laughed and waved off her concern. "Trust me, sweetheart. I know a poser when I see one. That guy's just trying too hard to look mysterious and cool. He's probably nobody special." Emma felt frustrated that her father wouldn't listen to her, but she wasn't ready to give up. She had a feeling that the quiet stranger was much more than he appeared to be, and she was determined to find out the truth. That night, while her family was sleeping, Emma quietly used her phone to search the internet for clues about the mysterious man's identity. Emma could not stop thinking about her conversation with the quiet stranger. Something about him seemed very familiar, but she could not figure out what it was. Late that night, while her family was sleeping, she sat on her bed with her phone and started searching the internet. She tried to remember details about the man's appearance. He had long, dark hair, was probably in his 50s, and had a very distinctive way of speaking. His eyes were kind, but also seemed like they had seen a lot of sadness. When he smiled, there were small lines around his eyes that showed he had spent many years either laughing or worrying. Emma started by searching for famous actors with long hair and looking through hundreds of photos. She felt silly doing it, but something deep inside told her that this man was more important than he appeared to be. Her father's constant jokes about him being a wannabe celebrity had made her curious about whether he might actually be a real celebrity. After an hour of searching, Emma found a photo that made her heart stop. It was a picture of Johnny Depp at a movie premiere, and even though he was wearing different clothes and his hair was styled differently, Emma was almost certain it was the same person she had talked to in the library. She stared at the photo for several minutes, comparing it to her memory of the quiet stranger. The nose was the same. The shape of his face was identical, and those kind but sad eyes were exactly what she remembered. Emma felt her hands shaking as she realized what this meant. Her father had been making fun of Johnny Depp, one of the most famous actors in the world. For 3 days straight, Emma quickly searched for more recent photos of Johnny Depp to make sure she was right. She found pictures from just a few weeks ago where he looked exactly like the man on the ship. He was wearing similar clothes, leather jackets, casual jeans, and sunglasses. In several photos, he was carrying books just like the man she had met. As Emma continued reading about Johnny Depp online, she discovered something that made her feel even worse about her father's behavior. Just 2 weeks before their cruise, Johnny Depp had visited a children's hospital in Italy. He had dressed up as Captain Jack Sparrow, his famous pirate character, and spent the entire day making sick children laugh and smile. Emma read article after article about Johnny Depp's charitable work. He regularly visited hospitals, donated money to children's charities, and helped families who could not afford medical treatment. The articles described him as shy and humble in real life, someone who preferred to help people quietly without seeking attention for his good deeds. One article mentioned that Johnny Depp had been going through some difficult personal problems recently and was trying to stay out of the public eye. The writer said he was taking time to heal and recover from some painful experiences in his life. Emma felt tears coming to her eyes as she realized the full truth. The man her father had been tormenting was not only a famous movie star, but also someone who spent his time helping others. And he was currently going through a difficult period in his life, probably hoping for some peace and privacy during his vacation. The quiet, patient way Johnny Depp had responded to her father's cruelty now made perfect sense. He was used to dealing with difficult people and had learned to handle situations with grace and dignity. He had probably been on this cruise hoping to read books, relax, and recover from his problems in private. Emma spent the rest of the night reading everything she could find about Johnny Depp. She learned about his movies, his music, his art, and his humanitarian work. She discovered that he was incredibly intelligent and well-read, which explained why he had been able to discuss literature with her so knowledgeably. The more Emma learned, the more ashamed she felt about her father's behavior. Marcus had been making fun of someone who was not only famous but also genuinely good and kind. Johnny Depp had been trying to help sick children just days before getting on the cruise. And instead of being allowed to rest and recover, he was being harassed by an arrogant bully. Emma also started to understand why Johnny Depp had not revealed his identity or fought back against her father's jokes. He was probably tired of always being in the spotlight and just wanted to be treated like a normal person. He had been hoping to have a peaceful vacation where he could read books and watch the ocean without being bothered. But Marcus had made that impossible by turning him into a source of entertainment for the other passengers. The next morning, Emma felt sick to her stomach as she watched her father getting ready for another day of making fun of the wannabe pirate. Marcus was excited about some new jokes he had thought of during the night. "I'm going to get that weird guy to finally react today," Marcus told his family at breakfast. "I've been too easy on him. Today I'm going to really embarrass him in front of everyone." Emma wanted to tell her father the truth immediately, but something stopped her. She realized that if she told him Johnny Depp's identity right now, Marcus would probably become even more obnoxious. He would start bothering the actor for selfies and autographs, and he would brag to everyone about meeting a famous person. Emma decided that Johnny Depp deserved better than that. She wanted to find a way to stop her father's cruelty without making the situation worse for the kind man who had treated her with such respect and intelligence. Meanwhile, other passengers on the ship were starting to have their own doubts about Marcus's behavior. Mrs. Chen, the elderly woman who had been watching the harassment since the first day, finally spoke up to her husband. "That poor man hasn't done anything wrong," she said. "All he wants to do is read his book in peace." "I think that Wellington man is being very cruel," her husband agreed. "I felt bad for laughing at his jokes yesterday. The man seems perfectly nice, just quiet. There's nothing wrong with that." Similar conversations were happening throughout the ship. Some passengers who had initially found Marcus's jokes funny were starting to feel uncomfortable. They began to notice that the quiet stranger never fought back or said anything mean in return. He just continued to be polite and dignified, which made Marcus's attack seem increasingly unfair. A few passengers even started to recognize something familiar about the mysterious man, though they could not quite place what it was. One woman thought he looked like someone she had seen in movies, and another man mentioned that the stranger reminded him of someone famous, but they could not figure out who. Emma spent the morning watching her father prepare for what he called his best performance yet. She knew she had to do something to stop him, but she was not sure what. She felt trapped between wanting to protect Johnny Depp's privacy and needing to save her father from making an even bigger fool of himself. As the day went on, Emma noticed that Johnny Depp seemed more tired and sad than he had before. The constant harassment was clearly wearing him down, even though he continued to handle it with grace. Several times Emma saw him look around the ship like he was considering whether to just leave and go home early. Emma made a decision. She could not tell her father the truth directly, but she could try to find another way to stop his behavior. She started planning something that would reveal Johnny Depp's identity to everyone at the same time, in a way that would make her father realize how wrong he had been. She had no idea that events were already in motion, that would soon expose the truth in the most dramatic way possible. The fourth night of the cruise was the formal charity dinner, the most important social event of the entire trip. All the passengers dressed in their finest clothes and gathered in the ship's grand ballroom. Crystal chandeliers cast sparkling light on elegant tables decorated with white flowers and gold accents. Everyone looked beautiful in their expensive gowns and tuxedos. Marcus wore his most expensive black tuxedo with a bow tie that cost more than most people's monthly salary. He had been bragging all day about how much his outfit cost. Sarah looked stunning in a long blue dress covered with diamonds. Even Emma and Jake were dressed formally. Though both teenagers looked uncomfortable with all the attention their family always attracted. The charity dinner was held every year to raise money for ocean conservation. Rich passengers bid on expensive items like jewelry, art, and vacation packages, with all the money going to help protect sea life and clean up the oceans. It was supposed to be a serious and meaningful event. Marcus made sure his family was seated at one of the best tables near the front of the room. He wanted everyone to see how important and wealthy he was. As soon as they sat down, he started talking loudly about how much money he planned to spend at the auction. "I'm thinking about bidding on that painting," he announced to the other people at his table. "It's worth $50,000, but that's nothing to me. I just bought a new car that cost more than that." He laughed loudly and sipped his expensive champagne. The other passengers at his table smiled politely, but Emma could see they were getting tired of her father's constant bragging. She felt embarrassed and wished she could disappear. About halfway through dinner, Captain Rodriguez stood up to address the room. He was a distinguished man with gray hair and a uniform covered with medals. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said into the microphone, "thank you all for joining us tonight for our annual charity dinner." The room became quiet as everyone listened to the captain's speech. "This year we have raised over $200,000 for ocean conservation, thanks to your generous donations. But tonight I have a very special announcement to make." Marcus perked up, hoping the captain might mention how much money he had donated. He had given $5,000, which was a lot for most people, but very little compared to what he could afford. "This year," the captain continued, "we have been honored to have a very special guest aboard our ship. This person has not only been generous with his own donation, but he has also inspired others to give more money to our cause." The room buzzed with curiosity as passengers wondered who the special guest might be. Marcus looked around, expecting to see some obvious celebrity or politician that he had somehow missed noticing. "Our special guest has given $50,000 of his own money to ocean conservation," Captain Rodriguez announced. "But more importantly, he has done it without seeking any attention or recognition for his generosity." Emma's heart started beating faster. She had a feeling she knew where this was going. This gentleman has spent his career bringing joy to millions of people around the world through his art. He has also used his fame to help charities and make the world a better place. Despite being one of the most recognizable faces in entertainment, he has traveled with us quietly, asking only for privacy and peace. Marcus was getting impatient. He wanted to know who this mystery celebrity was, and he was annoyed that he had not figured it out himself. "Who is it?" he whispered loudly to Sarah. Captain Rodriguez smiled and looked toward the back of the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, would you please join me in thanking our special guest, Mr. Johnny Depp?" The room fell completely silent for a moment, as if no one could believe what they had just heard. Then slowly, the quiet stranger that Marcus had been tormenting for 4 days stood up from his table near the window. Johnny Depp looked exactly the same as he had every other day. Long hair, leather jacket, and the same calm, dignified expression. But now that everyone knew who he was, they could clearly see that this was indeed one of the most famous actors in the world. The silence in the room was deafening. Every single person turned to stare at Johnny Depp, and then many of them turned to look at Marcus. remembering all the cruel jokes and harassment they had witnessed over the past few days. Marcus's face turned completely white. His mouth fell open and he stared at Johnny Depp like he was seeing a ghost. The expensive champagne glass in his hand started shaking so badly that champagne spilled onto his tuxedo. "No," Marcus whispered to himself. "No, no, no. This can't be happening." Sarah gasped and covered her mouth with her hands. She immediately understood the full horror of what had just been revealed. Her husband had spent 4 days publicly humiliating one of the most beloved actors in Hollywood. Emma felt a mixture of relief and terror. She was glad that the truth was finally out, but she was also scared about what this would mean for her family. Jake stopped playing with his phone and stared at his father with shock. Johnny Depp smiled politely and waved to the crowd, then sat back down without making a big scene. He clearly did not want to turn the evening into a show about himself. Even in this moment of revelation, he remained humble and gracious. The other passengers in the room began to applaud, slowly at first, and then more enthusiastically. But many of them were also looking at Marcus with expressions of shock, disgust, and disappointment. They remembered all the times they had laughed at his cruel jokes, and now they realized they had been laughing at Johnny Depp. Mrs. Chen, the elderly woman who had been watching Marcus's behavior with disapproval, shook her head sadly. "That poor man," she whispered to her husband. "He was just trying to have a peaceful vacation, and that awful Marcus Wellington made his life miserable." Other passengers began whispering to each other about what they had witnessed. "Did you see how mean Marcus was to him? Johnny Depp was so polite the whole time. I can't believe Marcus called him a wannabe actor. How embarrassing for the Wellington family." Marcus sat frozen in his chair, unable to speak or move. His mind was racing as he tried to process what had just happened. For 4 days he had been making fun of Johnny Depp, calling him a failed actor and organizing pirate-themed parties to mock him. He had encouraged other passengers to laugh at one of the most successful and respected actors in the world. Even worse, Marcus remembered all the social media posts he had made during the cruise. He had posted photos and videos of Johnny Depp online, calling him a wannabe pirate and a sad old man trying to be cool. Those posts had been shared by hundreds of people and seen by thousands. Captain Rodriguez continued his speech, thanking Johnny Depp for his charitable donation and his kindness to the crew and other passengers. "Mr. Depp has been a perfect gentleman throughout this voyage," the captain said. "He has treated everyone with respect and kindness, and he has asked for nothing in return except the chance to enjoy some quiet time away from the spotlight." With each word the captain spoke, Marcus felt smaller and more humiliated. He realized that Johnny Depp had known exactly who he was the whole time, but had chosen not to reveal his identity. The actor had endured days of harassment and cruelty without fighting back or embarrassing Marcus in return. Emma looked at her father and felt a mixture of pity and anger. She had tried to warn him, but he had been too arrogant to listen. Now he was facing the consequences of his actions in the most public and humiliating way possible. As the applause for Johnny Depp died down, Captain Rodriguez prepared to continue with the charity auction. But the mood in the room had completely changed. Everyone was thinking about what they had witnessed over the past few days, and many people were looking at Marcus with judgment and disappointment. Marcus knew that his life would never be the same after this moment. He had publicly humiliated himself in front of hundreds of wealthy, influential people, and the whole thing had been recorded on social media for the world to see. The revelation that would destroy his reputation had finally arrived. The news spread through the ship faster than wildfire. Within minutes of Captain Rodriguez's announcement, every passenger on the Royal Splendor knew that Marcus Wellington had spent 4 days publicly humiliating Johnny Depp. People began pulling out their phones to check social media, and what they found made the situation even worse for Marcus. The videos and photos that Marcus had posted online were going viral. His post calling Johnny Depp a wannabe pirate and failed actor had been shared thousands of times. But now that people knew the truth, the comments under his post were brutal. "This guy is harassing Johnny Depp and doesn't even know it," wrote one person. "What an absolute idiot," said another. "Imagine being this cruel to someone just trying to read a book in peace," commented a third. The comments kept coming, each one more critical than the last. Marcus sat at his table in the ballroom staring at his phone in horror as he watched his social media accounts explode with angry messages. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the phone. The humiliation was more complete than anything he had ever experienced in his life. Other passengers who had initially laughed at Marcus's jokes were now distancing themselves from him as quickly as possible. People who had encouraged his behavior and joined in his pirate-themed performances now pretended they had never participated. They whispered to each other about how they had always thought Marcus was going too far. "I never thought it was funny," Mrs. Chen told a group of passengers near her table. "That Wellington man was clearly being a bully. I feel terrible for that poor Johnny Depp." The couple who had laughed the loudest at Marcus's first performance were now telling everyone who would listen that they had tried to stop him. "We told him he was being too mean," the husband lied. "But he wouldn't listen to us." Even the crew members who had witnessed Marcus's behavior were talking about it. Carlos, the butler who served Marcus's family, told other staff members how rude and demanding Marcus had been throughout the cruise. "He never said please or thank you," Carlos explained. "And his tips were terrible, even though he bragged about how much money he had." The ship's entertainment director, Maria, felt terrible for organizing the pirate-themed party that Marcus had requested. "I had no idea he was using it to mock a specific person," she told her colleagues. "If I had known he was targeting another passenger, I never would have agreed to it." As word spread about Marcus's behavior, passengers began sharing their own observations. Many people remembered seeing Johnny Depp being harassed but had not realized who he was at the time. Now they felt guilty for not speaking up when they saw someone being bullied. "I saw that Wellington man following the poor guy around with his camera," said one passenger. "I should have told him to stop, but I thought it was just harmless fun." The worst part for Marcus was realizing how many people had actually recognized Johnny Depp but had chosen to respect his privacy. Several passengers came forward to say they had suspected the quiet stranger was someone famous, but had decided not to bother him. "I thought he looked familiar from the first day," admitted one woman, "but he was clearly trying to have a peaceful vacation, so I didn't want to intrude." "Unlike some people," she added with a meaningful look toward Marcus's table. Marcus's business reputation was also being destroyed in real time. His company's social media accounts were being flooded with negative comments from people who had seen his cruise posts. "Would never hire this company," wrote one person. "If this is how the CEO treats people, imagine how he treats his employees." Marcus received dozens of text messages and phone calls from business partners, employees, and clients who had seen the viral posts. His assistant called to tell him that 3 major clients had already canceled their contracts. His company's stock price was dropping as investors worried about the negative publicity. "Marcus, what were you thinking?" asked his business partner in a frantic phone call. "The whole internet is talking about this. We're getting calls from reporters asking for comments. This is a disaster." Sarah Wellington was also facing consequences. Her friends from the country club were calling and texting, asking if the man in the viral videos was really her husband. Her social media accounts were being filled with critical comments from people who blamed her for not stopping Marcus's behavior. "How could you just sit there and watch your husband bully someone?" wrote one person on Sarah's Instagram account. "You're just as bad as he is for not speaking up." Emma felt terrible about the whole situation, but she also felt vindicated. She had tried to warn her father that he was making a mistake, but he had been too arrogant to listen. Now she watched as her family's reputation was destroyed by his cruel behavior. The teenagers on the ship, who had been following the drama on social media, were sharing memes and jokes about Marcus's mistake. Emma saw posts calling her father the dumbest man on the internet and the guy who bullied Johnny Depp. She felt humiliated, but she also knew her father deserved every bit of criticism he was receiving. Meanwhile, Johnny Depp continued to handle the situation with grace and dignity. After the captain's announcement, he had quietly finished his dinner and left the ballroom without making a scene. He did not try to embarrass Marcus further or seek revenge for the days of harassment he had endured. Several passengers approached Johnny Depp to apologize for not recognizing him sooner or for laughing at Marcus's jokes. The actor was kind and forgiving to everyone who spoke with him. "Please don't worry about it," he told each person. "We all make mistakes." When Mrs. Chen apologized for not speaking up against Marcus's behavior, Johnny Depp smiled and said, "You have nothing to apologize for. Kindness is always appreciated, but you're not responsible for other people's actions." The contrast between Johnny Depp's gracious behavior and Marcus's cruel bullying became even more obvious as the evening went on. Passengers could see clearly who was the better person, and it was not the man who had been making all the noise and demanding all the attention. As the charity auction continued, Marcus sat in stunned silence while other passengers bid on expensive items. Nobody at his table would make eye contact with him, and he could hear people at nearby tables whispering about his behavior. The final humiliation came when the auctioneer announced the evening's biggest donation. "Ladies and gentlemen, our anonymous donor has contributed $100,000 to ocean conservation tonight. This generous person has asked that we simply say thank you and continue our important work protecting the seas." Everyone in the room knew that the anonymous donor was Johnny Depp. While Marcus had bragged about his $5,000 donation all evening, the man he had been tormenting had quietly given 20 times that amount without seeking any recognition. By the end of the evening, Marcus Wellington had gone from being a wealthy businessman who thought he was the most important person on the ship to being a laughingstock whose cruelty had been exposed to the entire world. His reputation was in ruins, his business was suffering, and his family was humiliated, and it was all because he had been too arrogant to treat another human being with basic respect and dignity. The next morning was the last day of the cruise, and Marcus Wellington woke up to a nightmare that had become his new reality. His phone had been buzzing all night with notifications from social media, news outlets, and business contacts. The story of his harassment of Johnny Depp had spread far beyond the cruise ship and was now international news. Marcus sat on the edge of his bed, reading headline after headline about his behavior. "Tech CEO bullies Johnny Depp on luxury cruise," read one article. "The most embarrassing man on the internet," said another. "When arrogance meets karma," wrote a third publication. The worst part was that all the articles included photos and videos that Marcus himself had posted. His own social media content was being used as evidence of his cruelty and ignorance. Every major news website had picked up the story, and Marcus's face was being shared around the world as an example of how not to treat other people. Sarah had barely spoken to her husband since the revelation at dinner. She was dealing with her own humiliation as friends and family members called to ask about the viral videos. "I can't believe you just watched him do this," her sister had said during a painful phone call. "How could you not stop him?" Emma and Jake were also struggling with the consequences of their father's actions. Their classmates back home had seen the videos and were sharing memes about their family. Emma's phone was filled with messages from friends asking if it was really her father in the videos harassing Johnny Depp. But as humiliated as Emma felt, she also felt something else: respect for Johnny Depp and disappointment in her father that ran deeper than embarrassment. She had tried to warn Marcus that he was making a terrible mistake, but his arrogance had prevented him from listening to anyone, even his own daughter. Marcus knew he had to do something to try to fix the situation, but he was not sure what. Every option seemed to make things worse. If he posted an apology on social media, it would just draw more attention to his behavior. If he said nothing, people would think he did not care about what he had done. Finally, Marcus decided he had to face the one person who deserved an apology most. He spent an hour trying to find the courage to approach Johnny Depp, and he finally found the actor sitting alone on the deck, reading his book one last time before the cruise ended. Marcus walked slowly toward Johnny Depp's chair, his heart pounding with nervousness and shame. The actor looked up as Marcus approached, and his expression was calm and patient, showing no anger or hatred despite everything that had happened. "Mr. Depp," Marcus began, his voice shaking with emotion, "I owe you the biggest apology of my life. What I did to you was inexcusable, and I'm deeply ashamed of my behavior." Johnny Depp closed his book and looked at Marcus with those same kind eyes that Emma had noticed in the library. "Thank you for saying that," he replied gently. "I accept your apology." Marcus was surprised by how easily Johnny Depp forgave him. He had expected anger, lectures, or demands for compensation. Instead, the actor was treating him with the same grace and dignity he had shown throughout the entire cruise. "I don't understand," Marcus said. "How can you forgive me so easily? I spent 4 days making your life miserable. I humiliated you in front of hundreds of people. I posted videos of you online without your permission. Why aren't you angry with me?" Johnny Depp smiled sadly. "I've been through much worse things in my life than someone making pirate jokes," he said. "Besides, being angry with you won't change what happened, and it won't make either of us feel better." Marcus felt tears forming in his eyes. "But I was so cruel to you. And you were just trying to have a peaceful vacation. You had been helping sick children before you got on this ship. And instead of being able to rest, you had to deal with my harassment." "How did you know about the hospital visit?" Johnny Depp asked with curiosity. "My daughter Emma researched you online after she talked to you in the library," Marcus admitted. "She tried to tell me I was making a mistake, but I was too arrogant to listen. She's smarter than her father, apparently." Johnny Depp's face lit up with a genuine smile. "Emma is a remarkable young woman. She has a strong sense of right and wrong, and she was brave enough to stand up for what she believed in. You should be very proud of her." Marcus nodded, feeling both pride in his daughter and shame about his own behavior. "She tried to stop me, but I thought I knew better. I was so focused on being the center of attention that I couldn't see I was hurting someone who didn't deserve it. The fact that you're here apologizing shows that you can learn from your mistakes," Johnny Depp said. "That's more than many people are willing to do." Marcus spent the next hour talking with Johnny Depp about what had happened and why. The actor listened patiently as Marcus explained his need for attention and his habit of putting other people down to make himself feel important. "I think I was jealous of you," Marcus admitted. "You seemed so calm and peaceful, like you didn't need anyone's approval. I've spent my whole life trying to impress people and prove how successful I am. But you were just sitting there reading your book, completely content with yourself." Johnny Depp nodded with understanding. "Fame and success don't automatically make you happy," he said. "I've learned that the most important thing is how you treat other people and whether you can be at peace with yourself." As they talked, Marcus began to realize how much damage his behavior had caused, not just to Johnny Depp, but to his own family and business. His reputation was destroyed, his children were embarrassed, and his wife was questioning their marriage. "I don't know how to fix this," Marcus said desperately. "My business is falling apart. My family is humiliated, and the whole world thinks I'm a terrible person." "You can't change what happened," Johnny Depp replied. "But you can choose how you respond to it. You can use this experience to become a better person, or you can let it destroy you. The choice is yours." When the cruise ship docked that afternoon, Marcus faced a crowd of reporters and photographers who had gathered to cover the story. Instead of trying to hide or make excuses, he stood in front of the cameras and gave a sincere public apology. "I want to apologize to Johnny Depp, to my family, and to everyone who witnessed my behavior on this cruise," Marcus said. "I was cruel, arrogant, and completely wrong. There is no excuse for how I treated Mr. Depp, and I take full responsibility for my actions." The months that followed were difficult for Marcus and his family. His company lost several major clients, and he had to lay off employees and downsize his business. Sarah seriously considered divorce, and Emma and Jake struggled with the embarrassment at school. But slowly, Marcus began to change. He started volunteering at local charities, donating money to causes that Johnny Depp supported, and working to rebuild his relationships with his family. He learned to listen more and talk less, to think before he acted, and to treat all people with respect regardless of their appearance or social status. Emma watched her father's transformation with cautious hope. It took time, but eventually she began to see glimpses of the man she had always wanted him to be, someone who cared more about being kind than being important. The story of Marcus Wellington's encounter with Johnny Depp became a legendary cautionary tale about the dangers of arrogance, bullying, and judging people by their appearance. But for Marcus himself, it became the beginning of a journey toward becoming a better human being. He learned that true success is not measured by how much money you have or how much attention you can get, but by how you treat other people when you think nobody important is watching. And sometimes, the person you're being cruel to might just be someone whose kindness and dignity will teach you the most important lesson of your life.